Butchers and butcherettes, Matt the Butcher here. I'm super excited today because in this video I'm going to be breaking down a whole lamb at my house with just a knife and a hacksaw. I'm going to show you through the whole process, how I do it, how I like to do it. There's a million different ways to break down a lamb, but I'm going to show you one way, a very efficient way that I like to do it. So I'm actually not going to be keeping this whole lamb for myself here. Since we are in a unique situation and we're all kind of quarantined in a house, we are going to be cutting this lamb up into 4 different shares. It's kind of like a lamb pool. So 4 different people threw in on a whole lamb. I'm going to be cutting it up, and any chef or butcher that wants to do something like this, you can definitely copy this method because we are going to actually pick all the pieces via Zoom. So it's kind of like an online butcher shop situation going on. It's really cool, it's unique. We're still trying to figure out all the loose ends and all that, but we will actually have we'll put a video out on all the rules of the lamb share. So please, let's get it started. Let's just take a moment real quick and look at the equipment that I'm going to be using for today's breakdown. So I have just a hacksaw here. I have my knife scabbard with my boning knives. A meat hook, 2 different steels, the vacuum sealer, food grade plastic bags, and just a couple towels to clean things up. Now, you guys don't need a whole apparatus like this. You can just have a regular boning knife. I would definitely recommend a steel, one kind or the other. We have a medium grade here and a fine steel. So really all you need is a hacksaw, boning knife, and plastic bags, whether it's going to be vacuum seal bag or just a regular bag. If your lamb comes with the organs in it, which this one does, I usually start with that because they're very delicate. So I'll just put them in a food grade bag, pop them in the refrigerator, and we'll portion those out later. So you just have the liver, the heart, and the kidneys. That's usually all they leave you with. You might get the spleen here and there, but that's about it. Now that I've taken out the organs, I'm just gonna work my way down and break this lamb into sections, starting with the head. I always keep a rag with me. Since this is like a freshly slaughtered lamb, it's still dripping, a little bit of blood here and there, so it's easy to just wipe it up with this. Especially if you're doing it in the house, you want to be as clean as possible. So there's a couple ways that I hold the knife. One is right here where I'll actually have the bolster of the knife in my palm, and my pinky will be around the blade there. This is called like the pistol grip or the widowmaker, because if you slip, you go right into your crotch, which is not a good thing. But I try not to use too much of the tricep. What I do is actually called a flex cut. So I just kind of flex my hand like this, and if your knife is sharp enough, it should be able to cut. So if you can kind of think like a dog pulling on a rope, and you're pulling back, the dog will usually do it in bursts of energy kind of thing, so that, say if he's pulling too hard, the rope will come right out of his mouth, and that may potentially hurt him. Same deal here. If you're just pulling with your tricep with no control over the knife, and you've come over the bone, you could go right into your gut. So doing this flex cut, you're still pulling with your tricep a little bit, but doing this flex cut here, you really minimize the potential of you coming over the bone and cutting yourself. So to me, you got a lot more control. So as you can see here, you just kind of flick your wrist a little bit. There you go. Nice and clean, no danger. And we'll move on to the next one. So the next step is removing the neck. And obviously it's got a bone in it, so you're gonna need a hacksaw. But you wanna cut the meat down to the bone first, and then use the saw to cut the bone. And then you're gonna take your knife again and cut the meat. And that will keep your cuts, the meat, fresh a lot longer. So I've cut down to the bone there. Boom. Nice and clean. Now that we have the head and neck cut, we're going to start cutting into the shoulder. But first thing we need to do is actually separate the breastbone here. So again, you want to cut with your knife first. Cut it down to the bone. Then you want to use the saw to split the breastplate. There you go. You also want to take out the kidney fat here too. I forgot to mention that with the other organs. Now that you have the breastbone split here, you want to count in between the 5th and the 6th rib. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you want your knife right in the middle there. So I stick it close to the 6th rib, and I pop it all the way through, and I bring it up. Make a nice straight line. And then on this side, I'll pop it through again, and just as straight as possible, bring it down all the way to the spine. So you have a nice straight line that you can meet on the other side. You want to line these cuts up here. You want to see this cut and line it up with this cut. It's very important. There you go. So you want to line the breastbone back up so you have the ribs lined up, the cut. You just cut straight across. And now that you have the cut from the other side lined up, now is the time you want to use the hacksaw, and you can kind of look through here to see how straight you want to cut it. You see that? You just want to be careful not to cut into the actual meat. So having a smaller hacksaw is definitely going to help. There you go. 2 beautiful, perfectly cut loins on this side and on this side. So now we're going to separate the middle section here from the hind quarter. And what I like to do is cut the belly and get as much belly as possible. A lot of people will just cut straight down here, but you're going to take the inside here of the flank and the outside here. And it's pretty easy just to follow the natural seams down to the hip bone. So you want to feel the hip bone, which is right here. So you just need to go a little bit more. And the flank is going to meet the hip bone exactly on. So the bone is here itself. As you can see, I'm cutting into it now. And now you have the full leg and the belly separated. And that was all just by utilizing the seam. So if you had cut straight down, you would have lost maybe 4 ounces of belly on this side and 4 ounces of belly on that side. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side here. You want to cut it right down to the bone. There you go. Now, there's a joint in between these 2 bones here, and if you need to, you can cut a little bit to see. It's called the sweet spot. and this will separate the bones perfectly. There you go. So it just went right into the vertebrae. You just crank this down on one side, crank it down on the other. And then you can hang this off the end of the table here. Make sure you, again, you want to cut the meat with a knife, the bone. With the saw. You have a nicely cut hind quarter from the loin there. We're going to break down the shoulder here now, and as you can see here, cutting it between the 5th and the 6th rib just gets the end of that blade bone, which is just cartilage, which you can cut through with your knife. But if you go over one more rib, you're going to cut into real bone. And if you go on the other side, you're going to lose an actual rib chop or part of the rib roast. So now I'm going to just use my hacksaw to cut right down the middle and separate the shoulder here. I like to cut it from this side because you can press the breastbones apart, and it automatically opens up the spine right there, which is ultimately going to make it easier for you to split this. As you can see here, there's the actual spine, and then there's the feather bones that come off of it. So if your blade goes to one side or the other, you can just use your knife to run along the actual feather bones here, so you can see, so you can get as much of the actual fillet, the shoulder fillet on each side. The next step here I usually do is just clean up any extra blood. There's some big veins in here, and sometimes when the lamb's neck is cut, some blood will rush down into the shoulder area. This looks real nice and clean, but yeah, I'll just take off some of these nodes here and put them aside. I'll try to do a yield test, a complete yield test that I'll be posting and going over as well. What I'm going to do here is actually separate the lamb breast. I'm going to have the shoulder loin in here. I'm going to separate the shank, and then I'll do I'll bone out the shoulder blade back here, and I'll actually tie the boneless shoulder into a roast. So you can separate it right now through the armpit right here. But I'm gonna actually crack the ribs, and then I'll remove the brisket, the bone-in brisket, and then I'll remove the shoulder loin. That's a beautiful bone-in lamb brisket right there. I have the shoulder loin, the bone-in shoulder loin at this point. Take this off. It's pretty much just an easy seam. You can rip most of it with your fingers, but you might end up actually ripping the meat. So I just kind of help it along with the tip of my knife here. Go. It's a nice bone-in loin. I'll end up taking this tendon out here, which I can do right now. So you can definitely roast this, and you can take the actual bone out. You can make, if you guys are familiar with copa or capicola, you can do the same thing with lamb. So this can be salted and air dried, boneless. It can also be brined or dry brined and then roasted and used as like a deli meat. It's a really unique cut that you can put on a charcuterie board. I might actually do that in the future as a future video. I know the crowd that went in on this lamb, that bought this, they like a lot of bone-in stuff here, so I might just leave this bone in. Now the next part, I'm just going to remove the shank here, and it is kind of stiff from rigor mortis here, but you're basically looking just for the joint right on the inside. So you just cut straight down behind the elbow, come around, bringing it towards the end. The edge of the table is going to help you out to expose that joint. It's pretty easy. Just getting those tendons. Boom. Nice foreshank. So the next part of this is taking out this bone here and then the blade bone here. So you want to feel for where the blade bone connects. Here's the joint. What I'll actually do is I'll come in the side of the blade and on top. And again, you want as much of the meat as possible on the roast and not on the bone, because this bone is coming out, even though it will be used for stocks and things like that. And it's nice to have meat on your bones for stocks, but I like meat on my roast better because I like eating meat roasted instead of slowly braised in a stock or something like that. And then you just use the tip of your knife to come down each side like that. You're exposing the blade bone here. You want to pop that ball joint. Like so. There is a small tendon that you need to get your knife underneath this ball joint and cut up into the actual blade. So as you see here, here's a plate, but there's a spike, there's a bone that runs the length of this that just spikes, jets out. So there's a tendon that you need to break underneath. And then from here, I usually do this with beef as well. Now that you have the blade bone exposed, the edges, you can just take your hook and scrape so you have a nice clean blade bone. From here, you should just be able to pull this back and out, and you get pretty much as clean a bone as you can. There's a little bit, probably could have gone a little bit slower, but yeah, that's pretty nice. And another thing is when you're doing butchery and you finally take out a bone, especially if you're having issues with it, like this was a bad time for me when I was starting out, and I could never get the bones just right, or my knife to whittle in there just right. So what I would do is I would take it out, I would clean it up real nice, and then I would try to memorize the anatomy. And as soon as you memorize it, you got to realize there's a left and a right side. So just to take this bone out here, I just run alongside Again, you want to stick close to the bone as possible. There you go. There are a couple tendons that you want to get out of here, especially if you're leaving this a roast. This is the shoulder. This is the ball socket area. So there's one big one right here. I think this is the bicep tendon here. You want to take that one out, and then this is like the lamb flat iron. In the beginning of the top of the flat iron is a pretty thick tendon that if you don't have nails, it's kind of hard to get out. But yeah, I just take out the top piece there. And sometimes, well, always, there's another one here. Just take that bad boy out. All right, and then you want to just look for any like nodes and blood and stuff like that. Like here's a vein. I don't mind eating stuff like this, but you know, it's all edible to me, but most people aren't gonna, it's not gonna sit well with them to see, you know, a big blood clot or a vein or something like that. And then you want to look for any nodes or even, you know, like a dye here. This is like an edible fruit dye. I think it's blueberry dye. Could be blue food coloring. Just take that off. Okay, so now we have this boneless lamb shoulder here, and there's a couple things you can do with it. You know, obviously you could grind this whole thing up and make, you know, merguez sausage out of it, or you know, some kind of sausage or salami even. You can just roll it and have, you know, a nice roast like this. You can even make this into into what I've sold before in restaurants called a pin cushion, and you kind of just tuck each side into it like this. You can stuff the middle of it. You can tie it so it looks like it's a pin cushion. But today I'm just gonna make it into a roll like this. I usually just start with the middle one here first. You have the slack string on this side and the short string on this side. Put your fingers out like this. A little trick that I was taught was you make a gun like this, like that. You bring it over, and then you make a peace sign. And you bring this through like that. And you have a nice lock knot here. And then you come over again, grab that short string, you make it tight. Now that I put, you know, 3 ties on here, I'll just come underneath this bad boy on this side, tie it up, and then come under each string here. That. Bring it underneath. Tie this one off, like so. And then personally, I like to just do that again on this side. And if you need a little bit more string, you can just tie it on. Oops. There's a nice bone and rolled lamb shoulder. Now that the shoulder is done, we're going to break down the lamb midsection. So you have the actual rib side here with the ribs coming down. You have the belly, and then the saddle, which is back here. They call it the saddle because that is where you would put a saddle on a horse, I guess, and that would be the saddle of a lamb. And then we're going to separate the belly out, the loin, the saddle, and then the rib. We need to do a couple cuts to prepare for breaking down this whole thing, but first I need to take out some of this remaining kidney fat here. Let's put that side. That side. So, as you see, you have the loin and the tenderloin here. So this is where the tenderloin comes from. If this was a beef carcass, this would be the porterhouse. So you have what would be the New York strip, and you have the filet mignon, and then you have the blade bone or the T-bone that connects it right down the middle here. So what we need to do is separate the belly from this. Why I like to utilize as much of the belly as possible is because it's freaking delicious, and I think a lot of people don't know how to utilize the lamb belly to its full potential. So what you need to do is cut all the way down to the first rib here, make it nice and parallel, same on this side. You don't want to cut into the loin, even though I just did. Don't do that, all right? You want to salvage as much of the loin, as much as the belly as possible. So you have a nice parallel saddle right there. Next step is to turn it over, and you want to line this cut up. So you have the first eye, loin eye here, and then you have the chain eye, the small eye right here. So if you look at this kind of looks like a ribeye. This is where a ribeye would come from on a beef carcass. So what I like to do is come down maybe about 1/4 inch after the chain eye there. And you want to line your knife up with the same angle as the cut back here. All right. And then I kind of do like a dry run. Just make sure it looks nice and even here. That looks good. Then I'm gonna cut all the way through. Okay, then I'm gonna pop in between each rib. Boom, boom. That's very important. I'm gonna show you why later. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side now. So now that we have the loin exposed here, we're looking for a special joint. I guess it would be the in between the vertebrae. So you want to kind of cut down and kind of show yourself where those cuts are. It's gonna be that bad boy right there. So like I said, you cut right to the last rib here, last rib here. You want to put your knife in the middle of that vertebrae, give yourself a little marking, put your knife at the end of the loin here, turn it in, 90-degree angle, and cut right to that loin. Do the same thing on this side. All right, now I just pop this down here. Come underneath if you need to. You can kind of twist this one off and cut it off. There you go. You have a nice, clean cut loin. So what I'm going to do here is cut the rib section in half, and then we'll go from there. All right, now we're gonna work on boning this out here. So you have this little diaphragm muscle or skirt steak. You can save this for later. You can incorporate this right back into the belly. You might want to clean up some of this sinew. And then there are feather bones, as you can see, that'll run right here. And we need to crack those. This is the perfect little flex cut for each one. There you go. So now that you've broken all those, and you just want the tip of the blade, you don't want to go through the belly. Okay, so now you see where I marked on the other side when we were lining it up? That's important because you want to start your knife there and run it all the way down the rib. And what this does is it gives you the full belly. You get those intercostal muscles there on the actual belly. And if you see here, that's another 4 ounces of meat that's actually going to stay on this belly here. And in the restaurant world, it's all about yields. So a lot of people just take this and run their knife down the rib cage, and they'll then line up the rack of ribs, the lamb rack, and I don't even know. They'll take the intercostal muscles, maybe put it in for stock or whatnot. But I'm telling you, this is where it's at. You got to leave it on the belly. All right, and you just come under each of the ribs. This is where, you know, I would recommend taking your time. Once you get better at it, you can go a little bit faster, but like I said, it's definitely worth it. You still get your rack of lamb. And you get a fattier belly. More meaty belly, sorry. Boom. Check that out. Okay, so when I remove the feather bones here, I usually start from the last rib. Just stay on top. You always want to angle your knife towards the bone, because if you cut into the bone, it's fine. You don't want to start hacking up the meat. You want to leave as much meat intact on the belly as possible. All right, then I come underneath the bone here. That's the feather bones. So the last little piece here is you want to make sure you take out the end of the blade bone. There, put that aside. We'll count that in the waist later. And then there's usually like a gland in here. You just want to cut that out, but save as much of the fat as possible. Anything unsightly you want to take out, any hairs they missed in the processor. Look at that beautiful lamb belly. You can make lamb bacon out of it. Roll it up like a sleeping bag after you cure it. Lamb keta, you can stuff it, roast it, braise it, smoke it. So this is kind of where it's a pain in the butt without having a bandsaw. You can chop all these off with a cleaver. That's pretty easy, or cleaver with cleaver and mallet. I don't have a cutting board that I want to sacrifice all those mean hacks, you know, if you're hacking away. So I'm just gonna use the hacksaw. Just hold the 2 ribs at a time. Now that you kind of cut off those little riblets there, you can, I just want to show you like a quick little way of Frenching them, which I've used over the years. You just take a piece of string here and you can tie it into a circle like this here. You can even, like if you get a cabinet door handle that comes, you know, like this, you can tie it to each of the ends. Either way, the idea is you take the string, put it around the rib here, go like this, then you lift up, and for the most part, it's going to take off a lot of that sinew on the bone. Go again. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but as you can see there on these, like the skinnier bones and stuff, it works really well. It takes it off. I usually do a run down each of the ribs with this, and then whatever is left over, I'll just get with my knife. So now that you have a an 8-bone French rack here, what I usually do at this point is cut them between the right in the middle. So each rack has 4 ribs. It may not look even, because it's a little bit smaller on this side, a little bit wider on this side, but there's more meat on this side than on this side. So it actually evens out weight-wise. So you just cut it right between the 4, or right in between the ribs here. got nice lamb rack. For the saddle, I'm just going to split this down the middle, and there'll be two separate bone-in roast. It's really nice for 2 people. All right, so now we are on the last section of the lamb. And to me, this is the easiest section. You got the hind quarter here, the legs, the top sirloin, or should I say the shank, the round, and the top sirloin here. I'm gonna split it in half, and then we'll work on one leg at a time. I'm actually going to cut right here, which is going to cut the top sirloin off. It does have a little bit left of the tenderloin head right here, and it's going to be bone in. The people that are part of this lamb share are perfectly capable of, cooking this roast bone in and figuring out how to carve it. Otherwise, if I didn't know that, I would absolutely bone this top sirloin out, because the bone is it's a little uneven and it's difficult to carve up. That's a gorgeous bone-in top sirloin right there, plus a little tenderloin head. Now you have the shank and the femur bone right here. What I'm actually going to do is, I'm going to leave the H bone on that you would normally take off. But like I said, the people that bought in on this lamb are perfectly capable of doing that themselves. So I'm going to tie this roast up. So that's going to be about that big, and then I'm going to cut it in half, and then you'll have the shank. So I can show you, 2 different ways of actually utilizing roast knots here. And this one here, you're going to have the short string above the roast, and then the slack string on the bottom here. And I always put it underneath, and then I pull it so it's nice and straight. So you have a nice tight string underneath. I'm gonna bring it over. I'm gonna have my hands like this, so the string is coming over into my palm, and you're gonna have your fingers like this, like a gun, and then you're gonna flip it over into a peace sign. I'll do it slowly. So you bring it over here, you bring your fingers out like that, so you have a peace sign. You snag that string. You bring it through the loop, okay? That's a slip knot now. So you can bring it up and crank it down. And that's gonna be a nice tight knot. And then you can take the long string here, twist it twice, grab the short string, and just lock it. Another knot is you take a piece of string, put it underneath the roast. You tie it 1, 2 times over each other. And you grab the string nice and tight, nice and tight. And you want the string over your 2 fingers like this, all right? Nice and tight. And what you do is you come around, you put 1 finger out, 1 finger down. I mean, 1 finger up, 1 finger down. And you bring it over the finger that's up top. You see that hasn't let go of any tightness. You bring that string underneath and you lock it. That's a nice tight roast knot. So what I'm gonna do now is, now that I have the lamb round or the lamb leg tied up nice and tight, I'm just gonna cut this with the knife, cut the femur bone with the hacksaw, and then cut the meat with the knife again, and you'll have 2 nice portions. I'm gonna cut the shank off here as well. So let me just do that. This is when you want your nice, 12-inch scimitar or breaking knife. Okay. Boom. Oh, baby. That's beautiful right there. Now you want to cut the shank off here. You want to just feel for the kneecap. And you're basically looking for the back of the leg. There you go. That's a nice braising shank right there. And then you have your joint, or the bottom half of the lamb leg. have completed a whole lamb breakdown. Now this lamb was focusing mainly on roasts, and this was a lamb that is going to be broken up into 4 equal shares. This is the first of many breakdown videos that is going to be on the Matt the Butcher channel. So guys, please subscribe, like, and if you have anything to add to what I said or did, please comment below.